Tonight, a father brings his daughter to the one place that means everything to him. What no one inside knows yet is about to change all of their lives. One glance is all it takes. In seconds, a hostess decides this man does not belong, and she has no idea how wrong she is. A little girl came expecting a magical night. Instead, she is about to witness her father humiliated in front of strangers. The manager arrives, not to help, but to finish what the hostess started. He is about to make the biggest mistake of his career.
What the staff inside do not know is simple. The man they just threw out owns the building they are standing in, and they're not.
If you have ever been judged by the way you look instead of who you truly are, this story will hit somewhere deep. So stay until the end, because the ending will surprise you completely. And if stories like this move you, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because there are so many more waiting for you. David Mitchell had not eaten a full meal sitting down in 11 days. Between conference calls, supplier negotiations, and the endless fires that came with running 5 restaurants across the city, dinner had become something he grabbed standing up, usually cold, usually alone. But tonight was different. Tonight was Friday, and Friday nights belonged to Lily. Lily was 7 years old, all curls and energy, the kind of child who narrated her own life out loud as though someone important might be listening. Since her mother passed away 2 years ago, Fridays had become their ritual, a small, sacred appointment neither of them ever missed, no matter how impossible David's week had been. Tonight, Lily had a request that made David's chest tighten with a mixture of pride and sorrow. She wanted to go to the Oak and Vine, the restaurant that had opened 3 years ago, the one David had built from nothing after years of working double shifts as a line cook, saving every spare dollar, teaching himself the restaurant business one exhausting lesson at a time. It was the place where he and his wife had planned their future before cancer took her far too soon. It was, in every sense, David's life's work. He rarely visited it in person anymore. With 5 locations now under the company umbrella, David spent his days behind spreadsheets and supplier calls, trusting his managers to run the floors while he handled the business from a cramped office 3 miles away. He had not set foot inside the Oak and Vine in almost 4 months. When Lily asked to go there, something in him softened immediately. He said yes before she even finished the sentence. He came straight from a warehouse inspection, still in the gray hoodie and jeans he had thrown on that morning, sneakers scuffed from walking the loading dock. He almost went home to change first, but Lily was already pulling her yellow sundress over her head, spinning in front of the mirror, begging him to hurry before all the good bread was gone. David laughed for the first time in what felt like weeks, and decided his appearance did not matter. He was, after all, only going to his own restaurant. They arrived just as the sun dipped low, painting the windows of the Oak and Vine in soft amber light. Lily skipped ahead, tugging her father's hand, chattering about the little chocolate tarts she remembered from the last time they visited, back when he used to bring her more often. David paused for a moment outside, looking up at the sign with his own hard work carved into every letter, and felt something rare these days. A small, quiet peace. That peace lasted exactly as long as it took to walk through the front door. The hostess on duty that night was Vanessa, a recent hire, barely 3 weeks into the job, eager to prove herself in a restaurant known for its upscale clientele and even more upscale prices. She had been trained, briefly and imperfectly, to maintain what corporate called the atmosphere. Somewhere in that brief training, she had absorbed the idea that atmosphere meant appearance, and appearance meant judging people at the door before they ever said a word. She looked at David's hoodie. She looked at his sneakers, worn soft from months of warehouse walking. She looked at Lily's simple sundress, sweet but plainly ordinary, and made her decision in less than 3 seconds. "I'm sorry," she said, stepping directly into their path, her voice polite but firm in the way people speak when they believe they are protecting something valuable. "This is a reservation-only establishment this evening. I don't think we have anything available." David blinked, more confused than offended at first. "We don't need a reservation. We've eaten here plenty of—" "I really can't seat you tonight," Vanessa interrupted, her eyes flicking meaningfully toward the well-dressed couple seated near the window, then back to David's sneakers. "Perhaps somewhere more casual would suit you better." The words landed like a slap. David felt the heat rise in his face, not from embarrassment for himself, but because Lily's small hand had gone still in his. He looked down and saw her expression crumble in real time, her excitement draining into confusion, then something worse, shame, the kind no 7-year-old should ever have to feel over a dinner reservation. "Daddy, are we not allowed?" Lily whispered, loud enough for 3 nearby tables to hear. A few guests glanced over. A woman in a cream blazer leaned toward her companion and murmured something behind her hand. David felt his pulse hammering, not with anger yet, but with the aching protective instinct of a father watching his child absorb an injustice she could not possibly understand. He kept his voice calm. "Can I speak to a manager, please?" Vanessa's jaw tightened, clearly relieved to hand the situation off. Within moments, Chad Palmer, the floor manager for the evening, emerged from the kitchen doors, straightening his tailored jacket as he approached. Chad had worked in fine dining for over a decade and prided himself on what he called reading a room. Tonight, he read David in the same 3 seconds Vanessa had. "Is there a problem here?" Chad asked, though his tone suggested he had already decided the answer. "I was told there's no table for us," David said evenly. "Even though we've dined here before, more than once." Chad's eyes swept David up and down exactly as Vanessa's had, lingering on the hoodie, the sneakers, the tired, unshaven face of a man who had spent his day inspecting loading docks instead of dressing for an occasion. "I understand," Chad said, in the tone of someone who understood nothing at all. "But we do maintain certain standards for our guests. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to step outside. There's a diner 2 blocks down that might be more your speed." "Oh." Somewhere behind them, a table of businessmen chuckled quietly. Lily's eyes welled up, and she pressed herself against her father's leg, whispering that she wanted to go home. David felt something crack open in his chest. Not fury, not yet, but a deep, bone-tired grief. He had built this restaurant with his bare hands. He had slept on a cot in the back office during the first 6 exhausting months, learning every joint of every chair, every crack in the tile, every name on the payroll. He had done it all so that people like his daughter would never again know what it felt like to be told they did not belong somewhere. And now his own restaurant was telling his own daughter exactly that. He could have pulled out his phone right there and ended the humiliation in 10 seconds. He could have announced who he was and watched Chad's confident smirk collapse into panic. Some part of him wanted to, but another part of him, the part that had learned patience through years of hardship, wanted to see something else first. He wanted to know how far this would go before someone recognized the truth on their own. He wanted to know exactly what kind of restaurant he had actually built underneath the polished floors and the warm string lights. "All right," David said quietly, taking Lily's hand. "We'll go." They stepped back outside into the cool evening air, and David crouched down to Lily's level, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. Hey, look at me," he said softly. "None of this is your fault, okay? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes about who deserves kindness, but we're going to fix it. I promise." Lily nodded, still sniffling, and David felt his resolve harden into something clear and unshakable. He pulled out his phone and typed a short message to Marissa, the general manager who oversaw the Oak and Vine's daily operations, and answered directly to him. He did not mention who he was to the staff. He simply asked her, calmly, to come to the front of the restaurant immediately. 2 minutes later, Marissa Chen came hurrying through the front doors, phone still in hand, scanning the entrance with visible confusion until her eyes landed on David. Her face went through 3 distinct stages in under 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, and finally a slow-dawning horror. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice dropping into a stunned whisper. "I am so sorry. I didn't know you were—" "You didn't know I was here," David finished for her, keeping his voice level but firm. "That's exactly the problem, Marissa. Nobody should have to be the owner for this restaurant to treat them with basic decency." Inside, through the glass doors, Vanessa and Chad watched the exchange unfold with growing dread. Chad's confident posture evaporated in an instant, his face draining of color as Marissa gestured urgently for him to come outside. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth, her earlier certainty collapsing into raw panic. "Mr. Mitchell," Chad stammered, stepping outside, all traces of his earlier smugness gone. "I had no idea. I would never have—" "You would never have humiliated a man and his 7-year-old daughter in front of a room full of strangers if you'd known he signed your paycheck," David said quietly. But you would have done it to anyone else who walked in wearing sneakers instead of a suit. That's what worries me, Chad. Not that you didn't recognize me, that you didn't need to recognize someone to decide they didn't belong. The words hung heavy in the evening air. Vanessa, standing just behind Chad, began to cry, her earlier confidence dissolving into genuine remorse as she realized the weight of what she had done, not to an owner, but to a father and his daughter, regardless of who he turned out to be. David let the silence sit for a long moment before he spoke again. I built this place so nobody would ever have to feel like my daughter felt tonight. Not customers, not staff, nobody. He glanced at Marissa. I want a full review of how we train our hosts and managers. Appearance should never decide who gets treated with respect in any restaurant with my name on the lease. Marissa nodded quickly, already pulling out her phone to make notes. Of course, Mr. Mitchell. Immediately. Chad, to his credit, did not make excuses. He simply nodded, jaw tight, clearly bracing for the termination he assumed was coming. And in that moment, David surprised everyone, including himself. Chad, Vanessa, he said, I'm not going to fire either of you tonight. Both of their heads snapped up in disbelief. But, David continued, you're both going to spend the next month working the exact way you should have worked tonight. Every guest, no matter what they're wearing, no matter how they walked in, gets treated like they matter. If I hear even one story like this again from anyone, about anyone, that decision changes immediately. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Vanessa whispered, wiping her eyes. I understand. I'm truly sorry. Chad nodded firmly. It won't happen again, Mr. Mitchell. I promise you. David looked down at Lily, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide, curious eyes, her earlier tears drying on her cheeks. He knelt beside her once more. You ready to go get those chocolate tarts now? He asked gently. Lily managed a small, wobbly smile and nodded. Marissa personally escorted them to the best table in the house, near the window where the last light of sunset spilled gold across the linen tablecloth. The same patrons who had watched David turned away 20 minutes earlier now watched him seated with quiet reverence, whispers rippling through the room as word spread of who he actually was. But David paid them no attention. His focus was entirely on his daughter, who was already deep into an elaborate story about her class hamster, her earlier humiliation forgotten in the comfort of her father's presence and the promise of dessert. Over the following weeks, David quietly rewrote the training program across all 5 of his restaurants, insisting on a single unshakable rule printed on the first page of every employee handbook. Every guest who walks through that door deserves warmth, patience, and respect before a single word is exchanged, regardless of what they are wearing or what they appear to be able to afford. Vanessa, true to her word, became one of the most attentive hosts in the company within months, later telling a coworker that the night she almost turned away her own boss taught her more about kindness than any training session ever could. Chad, humbled by the experience, began personally mentoring new hires on the very lesson he had failed to learn himself. As for David and Lily, Fridays remained sacred. They returned to the Oak and Vine every single week after that, always greeted now not with judgment, but with the kind of genuine warmth David had always hoped his restaurant would offer to everyone, not just to the man whose name was on the deed. Because in the end, the true measure of the place he built was never about the elegant tablecloths or the warm string lights. It was about whether a tired father in a gray hoodie holding his daughter's hand could walk through the door and simply be treated like he belonged. And now, finally, he could.